Well, a very good evening. Joining us to take the conversation forward with respect to the latest developments in the telecom space is none other than Mr. Sharma himself, chairman of the telecom regulator TRAI. Sir, glad that you can spare time for us. I'll first begin with asking, sir, from the news point of the day coming in from the telecom industry, the Honorable Minister made a very interesting remark while addressing a press conference that, and this is with respect to 5G, that India missed the bus as far as 3G and 4G is concerned, but now India wants to actively participate as far as 5G is concerned, setting down the specifications, etc. So that is a key departure from the earlier position. Just a word, sir, in the drive towards 5G, the government clearly has the 2020 target in mind. What do you think about it?
That's a music to my ears. You know, this is something which I have always believed in. Why should India be behind on the technology curve? Because ultimately software, information technology, telecom, they are all our strengths, and we must really be leveraging these things for our social development. Also remember that 5G as a technology, as a deployment, you know, this is not traditional technology. Typically, ICT technologies are used in related to, you know, issues related to ICT, which is communication and other kinds of things. 5G is a departure in the sense that 5G is going to be used in areas which are not normally associated with technology.
Internet of Things.
No, Internet of Things. It is basically agriculture, irrigation, health, you know, big data. So those are essentially the things, and we have the, you know, we have the bandwidth, we have the scale, we have a very vibrant telecom market, and there's no reason why we should be behind. And I think the Honorable Minister has made absolutely right statement, and India should be participating in all these standard setting deliberations, and we should be ahead on the curve.
Fair enough, sir. Taking off from what you said, we have the bandwidth, we clearly have a vibrant market in place. My question is, do we really have the financial capacity when we speak of telcos to go ahead and to make that leap in terms of 5G, because we are already seeing stressed balance sheets?
I think you are misplacing these things. You know, you are saying, you know, the only thing which I see is the spectrum part, which will require acquisition, and maybe 5G will also require some spectrum to be delicensed also. So that part we are deliberating currently. But I think otherwise our ecosystem should be ready. I mean, there's nothing which prevents us from not being ready.
Fair enough. Target 2020 it is. Let's move on to another issue, which again for which 2020 is a key benchmark, and this of course being IUC here. Let me first begin with an interesting comment that we heard just a little while back coming in from one of the leading telcos, that the IUC regulations are such that they've put the telcos into ICU, pun intended. Just a sense on the vibes that you have been getting, the feedback that you've been getting post the regulations with respect to stress in the space.
Look, I want to clear one thing. We must all understand that ICU, not IUC. IUC is essentially a charge which one telco pays to another one for handling his call, right? It's called. That's the way it is. Now, IUC cannot be. It's a reimbursement of efforts put in by the other. It's a work done on work done principle. It cannot be a profit vertical for any company. Right. So basically, the cost which should be paid to that company should be no less or no more than what it is really, you know, put in. So therefore, I don't see any relationship between the IUC and the stress or the ICU which you mentioned about.
Fair enough. So just in fact, before we proceed, just one question, a preliminary question, if I can just take it out of the way. The first time that we saw the telecom regulator come down with respect to IUC regulations was way back in 2003. At that point as well, given that regulations were being brought in for the first time, there was some teething worries, because of which we saw the regulations being revised 6 months hence. Just to take this preliminary question out of the way, can we expect perhaps more consultations, or is this here to stay for good?
Look,
as far as
the point is that we started the consultation on 5th of August 2016, and today we are on what, 26th of September 2017, and the regulation was issued on 19th of September. So I think we went through a year-long consultation process. We actually started we called for comments. We gave a time to a number of times we gave. Typically our consultations take about 6 months to mature to a recommendation or a regulation. This time it took about 13 months plus to come to that. So we had an extensive consultation. The telecom service providers in one of the open house discussions requested for a workshop on that. So we had a workshop to understand the cost models and the things. And thereafter we went, after this whole process. So we have been extremely transparent. We have not been in a hurry to do this. And then we have been extremely objective. For the first time, you will see that the explanatory memorandum, that is of 62 pages, 32 pages out of that are devoted to the cost sheets and the cost models.
Indeed.
So it is, and everything is transparent, and the data is provided by our telecom service providers.
Fair enough.
There are no assumptions.
True.
The total cost came to 5.9 paisa, and we rounded it up to 6 paisa.
True.
So therefore, if somebody is making the assumption that we made assumptions and stuff like that, that's not correct.
Fair enough, of course. I did in fact go through the EM, and it's very particular, as you pointed out. One of the arguments that we saw as far as the EM is concerned is where the BAK, the bill and keep model, is now being increasingly pitched as a tool to push for VoLTE. VoLTE, you've argued, as far as the EM is concerned, that is a much more efficient system for transmitting of calls and data. Just a sense on the benefits that perhaps one can expect to accrue if and when we do make that transition as far as VoLTE is concerned.
No, you see, we are not talking of VoLTE. We are talking of generally IP-based 4G technologies, right? That's let it be very broadly. Now, on all these technologies, data becomes the main raw material on which you construct various products. It's like a Lego or whatever. So you construct various things. So voice is an application of data. Picture, text, videos, they're all, in some sense data only in various different forms. Now what happens is in 1 megabyte of data, you can handle 4 minutes or 5 minutes of voice call. So the cost becomes really next to zero. It becomes very insignificant. So the point is that once you come down to those IP-based technologies, the voice becomes another application on top of the data. And there, the bill and keep, after all, bill and keep has got two words, bill and keep. Now, what do you bill? You bill what you really spend, or what what it takes for you to make that product, right? Or handle that product, so to say. Now, that cost of that product itself is next to zero.
Right.
Therefore, what will you bill?
Okay.
So, essentially, bill and keep is a natural progression.
Fair enough.
To a situation where all the networks become the IP-based networks.
Fair enough. Allow me to play the devil's advocate here.
Sure.
As far as the VoLTE network is concerned, or IP-based, as you rightly put it, the broader term, are the networks ready to make that transition? I get the distinction.
Why should rural areas be suffering and be having 2G and
True.
That's one part.
Yes.
Secondly, I think every operator. Every major operator has committed to IP-based technologies, call it VoLTE or whatever. And there are, deployments also which have started happening.
That's right.
And we see a very good, progress in that direction. In a way, this regulation which is currently given, which is basically computes the cost as it obtains in December 2016 data.
Fair enough.
This cost is progressively going to go down. Right, in that sense. In fact, we did not take the current data.
That's true.
We said, no, let's not make it, because this particular regulation makes no assumptions, not even a single assumption. So therefore, this is a natural thing which is going to happen. And I'm very hopeful that this will happen. And we have been a little conservative in 1/1/2020 in estimating that.
So let me continue with that question here, that as far as the lyric model that has been used, the EM, the explanatory memorandum itself states that this transition itself will take about 2 to 3 odd years. Combine that with the high spectrum costs that's unique to India. We have very high spectrum costs. Is it wise to use a model that ignores these legacy costs, that ignores the spectrum costs? Because that is something that we are seeing cause a lot of dead bodies.
You said that you have read the explanatory memorandum. And if you have read the explanatory memorandum, there are a number of paragraphs devoted to this particular issue as to why Lyric is the model to use. I think you have read there how many countries in the world are using it, what are the rationale for it. So I don't really need to, I don't even remember all those 15 to odd paragraphs which actually give the reason for the lyric model, but lyric is the most appropriate model because that's the model which actually does not take into account what is called a common cost. And the whole idea is that those common costs are not incurred by operator to take care of the outsider's call. After all, spectrum is not purchased to handle the other party's calls. Spectrum is purchased for your own calls, for your own data. So that there is a huge logic for using the lyric, pure lyric as we have
pure
done.
Lyric, yes. But again, just one question as far as pure lyric is concerned. We saw comparisons being drawn with overseas jurisdictions such as Europe. Would that be an apple-to-apple comparison or an apple-to-oranges perhaps, given that these are advanced, mature?
In fact, we are a bigger apple. Put it this way, what are these countries? 26 countries have gone in for pure lyric. They are very small countries.
Right.
We are a much matured, much larger scale market. I mean, and what do we compare? Can we compare the cost? We are one of the cheapest markets in the world as far as telecom is concerned. So I think somebody probably pointed out that in developing countries we are not a developing country. We should not, in the telecom space, we should not compare ourselves to developing countries. We are a developed market. We are a very mature market. We are the second largest market in the whole world. So there's no reason why we should be sort of diffident about using those methodologies.
Fair enough. No reason to be apologetic. Just one last question as far as lyric is concerned. This one, with respect to the 2015 approach that we had. At that time, TRAI was batting for a lyric plus approach and had rejected the pure lyric form. This time we've seen the other thing, the other way around. So what has changed in the last 2 years?
Let me again go back to the same question. Right. I explained to you that the explanatory memorandum precisely provides answer to this question also as to why lyric plus was used then and why pure lyric is being used now.
Fair enough. So we'll add a hyperlink as far
absolutely.
as to
please
the
do
EM
that. Please
for
do
our
that.
viewers.
In fact, it is one of the most comprehensive explanatory memorandum, and I think every question is answered there.
Fair enough, sir.
Transparency has been the hallmark of TRAI. We have been extremely transparent. We have, for the first time, shared the cost models, the cost sheets, and we'll be very happy if somebody can find an error.
Fair enough.
And we'll be ready to rectify that.
Speaking of scrutiny, are you anticipating? They've of course made their stance quite clear. They will be challenging it across various forums. We understand TRAI has already filed caveats. So are you ready? Are you preparing for that battle, which is likely around the corner now?
See, absolutely. We will defend our stand in the courts, before the courts, as and when the appeal or whatever rates or whatever methodology they have filed. We will certainly do that.
So just a couple more questions. I'll just take 2 more minutes of your time. The last question being, as far as IUC is concerned, that this is of course something that the sentiments are quite clear. It's a polarizing issue for the sector. But as far as you are concerned, do you see perhaps more stress on the balance sheets of the company, and on account of that stress, will it add more weight perhaps to their claims when they seek more relief?
I just want to ask you a question.
Yes.
How is IUC connected with the stress in the sector?
I'm just voicing the opinion of the telco.
This is just a question.
True.
See, IUC is a charge,
right, which
is cost-based. So you are being paid for the efforts which you put in.
True.
Right? So, and that should, normally everybody will agree, that should not become a profit vertical for any company.
That's true.
Right? The more you handle, the more you will be paid at that particular rate. So if IUC is not a profit vertical and IUC is cost-based, where is the question of IUC impacting the stress in the sector, one way or the other?
So you don't see that affecting their balance sheet?
No, I'm just asking a question. I'm being logical in it. I mean, maybe in this world everything is connected to everything else, so one doesn't know. But what I'm saying is that logically, I do not see any connection between the stress in the telecom sector and the IUC charges, if the charges are based on the actual costs.
Fair enough, sir. Last question, sir. This one with pertaining to call drops. That is another area where TRAI has been very active. We've recently seen a new mechanism. Just some clarity, the telcos have sought for more time in terms of coming to terms with the new regime. They've sought time till March 2018. Have you received such requests?
Yeah, I have received such request, and that request has also been responded to today only. The issue is as follows. The earlier QoS regulations basically said that if you are within 2% of call drops, you are doing fine.
That's right.
What had happened was that that particular 2% average actually hid a lot of things. For example, if let's say if there is an area in the LSA and one particular area is completely shut down for for the whole month, and the number of customers in that area or number of customers in that area is less than 2%, then you are within 2% call drop, right?
That's right.
In that sense. So it actually did not take care of the temporal and the geographical issues. So the new methodology which we have prescribed takes care of both these issues. If one BTS is down for a very long time, it will basically be standing out. It will contribute more to the call drops, and it will actually show in that particular part. We have now done a percentile basis.
Fair enough.
We are saying 90% of the BTS should not emit to drop more than 2% calls in 90% of the time. So those temporal and geographical issues have been taken care of. This data, BTS wise call data, is something which we have been getting from the operators already. They are producing that data.
True.
So anything, we do not see any extra thing being done by the operators because they already have access to the data. They can just process that data, and processing the data, ordering that data into a descending order and ascending order, and doing that basic calculation is not a great thing.
Fair.
So let me not trivialize the issue. Let me say that yes, there will be certain effort required.
True.
But this effort will be merely from the perspective of collating the data and processing the data. That really is not something which we see as something which should take 6 months. And nevertheless, the data processing will be done from 1st October to 31st of December.
Fair.
And that will be done in the first week of January.
Okay.
So therefore, you already have 3 months' time to really set up the kind of processing mechanism.
So the October 1st deadline stands.
So we think that, especially because it's a consumer related issue, and call drops are an important problem which need to be solved, especially from a temporal perspective. Some BTS should not remain kharab for all time. So therefore, that's why we are of the view that we are not inclined to give any more time.
Fair enough, Mr. Sharma. You've been very patient with us. We appreciate all the time that you've given us and the clarity you've given not just to us but also for our viewers. That, of course, was Mr. Sharma making his opinion clear that as far as the IUC is concerned, more about noise than substance at this stage, and asking our viewers to in fact read through the EMs, which in his words are crystal clear and give a clear picture as to why this new regime is in place as of today and again as of 2020. With that, it's back to you.